the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has resumed after being on a temporary pause for health risks. You might remember that the Baltimore lab that ruined 15 million doses of the vaccine, well, now their CEO is under fire for selling $10 million worth of shares before revealing their mistakes. It's been reported that the CEO of the Baltimore lab sold $10 million worth of shares before. It's almost like he knew something that we didn't know. You could say that he got out at a good time, considering his shares are now worth half of what he sold them for. Join me now from Dallas, Texas, co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors, Seth Denson. Seth, thank you for joining me. Seth, it's rather curious, the timing of his sale, right? I mean, the optics of this don't look good. And I know what they'll say. It's like, oh, we didn't know, and, you know, whatever. You can't accuse me of this. But it really doesn't look good.
It really doesn't. And I mean, if only we could forecast Bitcoin as well, right?
Yeah.
But no, I think, listen, while I'm not quick to always defend these guys that seem to have information and make these sales, the reality is that the SEC has a process in place called the 10b5-1 trading plan. I'm sure that's on everybody's forefront of their mind, where when a CEO has information on something, they have to wait a certain amount of time before they can sell shares. And that timeline for this CEO, for Robert Kramer specifically, was 6 months. So unless Mr. Kramer knew 6 months ago that this issue was going to happen, he's probably in the clear from a legal perspective, but from an optics perspective, yeah, it doesn't look good.
Yeah. And in the introduction, I played the clip of Kamala Harris talking about vaccine hesitancy. She's part of the problem. Do you remember when President Trump was talking about the vaccine and how people should get vaccinated so that we can get back to normal? She was one of the first high-profile people to go out there and say, you know, I wouldn't trust this vaccine. And now they're kind of confused, like, why not everyone in this country wants to get vaccinated?
She certainly was, and even Vice President Pence during their debate tried to call her out on that and said, hey, you're creating a lot of the noise that's creating dissension and this concern over it. I mean, listen, I'm sure that if President Trump were still in the White House, Democrats would try very hard to find a way to link the Johnson & Johnson challenges to the Trump administration, as if Trump were in the lab pouring something into the vials, right? But the reality is Democrats have to reap what they sow. And Kamala Harris, specifically the vice president, was out there knowingly putting disinformation out there about these vaccines early on in her campaign for the presidency.
Yeah, it's really terrible. So Democrats continue to think that money grows on trees. So this is just another episode that we'll be discussing today. So the Democratic senators are now urging Biden to expand Medicare in the next big spending bill. And they want to add in a ton of stuff like dental and vision. And also they want to change the age requirement, which, like, I get where they're coming from. But also, I didn't see a price tag for this. I would imagine it'd be very expensive.
Yeah, I don't know that we've seen a price tag yet. We do know that we spend currently about $800 billion on Medicare every year today as it currently sits, and that Medicare is going to be insolvent by 2026. And so as we start to think about lowering the age, expanding access, improving benefits, all of which, hey, that sounds great. Somebody's got to be the adult in the room and recognize you got to pay for these things some way, some shape, somehow. And eventually you're going to run out of other people's money, which is what you're trying to tax, to continue to expand these benefits.
Yeah, and this is a big push from Senator Bernie Sanders. And as you know, he's kind of the king of socialism here. He calls it democratic socialism, by the way. And somehow that's different from socialism, but yet no one's actually been able to identify the differences when you ask them.
Yeah, we've talked about this. Never let a good crisis go to waste, and it seems like the Democrats want to double down on that. I mean, our deficit spending already, we're at $1.7 trillion already this early into the year, which means this trajectory will be at over $3.5 trillion, 300% over our normal deficit spending on top of all the trillions we've already spent. But hey, we got to hurry up and spend this money because eventually Americans are going to wake up and realize this COVID thing might be in the rearview mirror, so we can't use it anymore to get more spending out there.
Yeah. Well, and this whole spending idea, the Democrats are just trying to ram this all through in Biden's first 100 days. And I see what they're trying to do here, but politically speaking, I don't think it's a good strategy as we go into 2022, because I have a feeling those, quote, moderates that supported Biden because they didn't like Trump's tweets, they're probably like, you know, just wondering what is going on every single day, wondering if they're in a bad dream, wondering when this is all going to end.
Yeah, and as we continue to see inflation kick up, the value of the dollar go down, many of the states that maybe vote a little bit more sanely get more opportunities for Congress as a result of the recent census. I think many are going to wake up to the reality that that money doesn't grow on trees. It's actually coming out of everyone's pocket. And when that becomes the reality, sentiment starts to change.
Yeah. Shift gears here and talk about taxes. So the IRS is holding over $29 million in unprocessed tax returns. So they're delaying the refunds for many low-income families. So what's going on here?
Well, listen, you will find that rarely am I going to defend the IRS, but this is one of those cases where I just might for two reasons. One is we didn't give them a whole lot of more staff to try to process all of the stimulus checks and everything that was going on. And in addition, the government said, hey, we got to socially distance. So we're going to shut down the working offices. We're going to move people around. So there was a huge lift that the IRS, the persons within the IRS had to do, and they had fewer resources to get it done. So this is one of those great scenarios where Washington says do something, but yet doesn't necessarily understand the ramifications of that something they're requiring others to do.
Yeah, well, I didn't think you would defend the IRS, but it's interesting now that we have like the whole COVID thing. Just blame it on COVID. Not that the IRS has ever been running super efficiently ever, but right. Now they have a good excuse that you just got to blame it on COVID. Well, Seth, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.